Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. You're joining me here today on board a West Midlands railway service heading towards Walsall. Today we'll be looking at another railway with reopening plans well underway. A railway that, like the Camp Hill and Cowley branch lines, is still open, but has seen no stopping passenger services for the best part of the last 60 years. The railway in question is the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, a 6.5 mile long railway linking two populous areas in the West Midlands that has plans for the reintroduction of 2 trains per hour in conjunction with 2 stations being reopened along the way. So in this video, we'll be covering what the current plans surrounding the reopening of the railway are, the history of the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, the areas that will see a station reopened, any alternative proposals that have been put forward previously, and any amendments that could be made to ensure that the railway reopening is as successful as possible. If you like this video, make sure to like it, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. Doing these things massively helps me out and I really appreciate you doing so. Now, let's get into the video. The West Midlands Combined Authority have put forward plans to reopen the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, with construction now well underway at the 2 planned new stations. The WMCA believe that by 2 trains an hour calling at Darlaston and Willenhall towards Wolverhampton and Walsall, there will be a reduction in journey times, a reduction in congestion and CO2 emissions, and allow journeys made between the 2 locations for work, leisure and educational purposes to be made much easier. The proposed service pattern along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line is for the existing Birmingham New Street to Shrewsbury West Midlands railway service to make calls at Darlaston and Willenhall between Cambridge Parkway and Wolverhampton, and for a brand new Walsall to Wolverhampton hourly service which calls at those 2 stations as well. Given how promising this all sounds, I think now would be a good time for us to discuss the history behind the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, so here goes. The story of the Wolverhampton to Walsall line begins with the Grand Junction Railway, a railway company which built a link between Warrington and Birmingham Curzon Street, snaking through Stafford and Wolverhampton along the way. The railway skirted around Walsall and Wolverhampton initially, with stations opened at Bescot Bridge, James Bridge, Willenhall, Portobello and Wolverhampton on the 4th of July 1837. It was an easy line to build due to industrialisation not having quite taken off by that stage, and the line mostly traversed through open countryside between Warrington and Stafford. Unfortunately for the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, both the station names and the stations themselves didn't last for especially long, without seeing some sort of change, with Bescot Bridge getting the ball rolling when it closed in 1850 after the South Staffordshire Railway extended their railway from Winchenall Junction to Dudley. This negated the need for a horse-drawn bus service used by the London and North Western Railway to link Bescot Bridge and Walsall. A station opened at Wolverhampton on the Stour Valley Railway in 1853, prompting the closure of the short-lived original Wolverhampton station, and for services to instead be diverted to serve the brand new Wolverhampton station, though the original Wolverhampton station site later reopened 2 years later as Wednesfield Heath. The London and North Western Railway Company wished to open a station much closer to Darlaston town centre, and so constructed a loop in 1863 which took the line much closer to the town centre in Darlaston, with a station opened named Darlaston, before continuing on to Wednesbury meeting the South Staffordshire Railway to complete the loop. But passenger services traversing the loop were short-lived, and by 1887 passenger services had ended, with freight services continuing to use the loop well into the 1960s. It was also around this time that the station at Portobello was shut as the station was deemed to be unprofitable. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for the Wolverhampton to Walsall line though, given Bescot Bridge reopened as Wood Green in 1881, which coincided with a station at Pleck just opening off the Bescot Road. While the London and North Western Railway were facing fierce competition from the Wolverhampton and Walsall Railway, who constructed a railway of their own between Wolverhampton and Walsall, which later shut in the 1930s, it wasn't long before the Wolverhampton and Walsall line were to suffer a similar fate. Pleck Station closed in 1958, with passenger services formally ending in 1965, which coincided with the closure of the 2 remaining stations at the time, Willenhall Bilston Street and Darlaston James Bridge. Despite the station closures along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, the line was later electrified by British Rail as they deemed the railway to be a strategic freight route and diversionary route for services spurring off the West Coast Main Line. So what's been the story of the line since the stations were closed? Walsall saw various rail improvements towards the end of the 20th century, which included the reopening of the Chase line to Hensford in 1989 with further extensions onto Rugeley Town in 1997 and Rugeley Trent Valley in 1998. This prompted Central Trains to trial an hourly passenger service between Wolverhampton and Walsall in a bid to improve connectivity between the two areas and turn a 40-minute journey on a bus into a 15-minute journey on a train. The service had taken various formats, where it started out as a Wolverhampton to Walsall shuttle until the early 2000s, when the service was extended to Wellington. These services out to Wellington were cut back in 2006 to Wolverhampton, bar a few early morning or late evening trips which continued on to Wellington. Despite how successful the other rail improvements around the time had been in Walsall, this service turned out to be a failure for Centro, with the lack of intermediate stations between Wolverhampton and Walsall and low passenger numbers poised to be the reasons behind the service's failure, prompting the Strategic Rail Authority to propose withdrawing the service in 2005. Despite passenger numbers having reached 60,000 a year by 2008, the government chose to follow through with the Strategic Rail Authority's suggestion to withdraw the service, and a weekday parliamentary service was later introduced in December 2008 with a departure from Walsall towards Wolverhampton at 7:36 p.m, but this was later replaced in May 2013 by a Saturdays-only departure at 5:42 a.m. from Wolverhampton towards Walsall. Since then, there have been plenty of calls for stations and passenger services to be reinstated along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, although until now, none have come to fruition. But we'll look at any alternative proposals later on in the video. Now we'll begin discussing the areas which the Wolverhampton to Walsall line passes through. We'll begin in Walsall, a market town home to 70,000 people in the heart of the West Midlands. With a history rooted in industry, Walsall was seen centuries ago as a prosperous town owing to its vast supply of coal, iron ore and limestone, but later evolved into an industrial powerhouse well renowned for its leather trade, which led to the town manufacturing the Queen's handbags, saddles for the royal family's horses, and leather goods for the then Prince of Wales, Charles III. But Walsall has a rather different look to it nowadays, with the centre of Walsall heavily centred around shopping and commerce, as you would expect with most market towns and small cities across the country. Walsall's town centre underwent extensive redevelopment in the 1970s at the expense of various medieval properties, but has held up well since and boasts a myriad of retail outlets and two shopping centres, the Sadler's Centre and the Old Square Shopping Centre, with the former's top floor integrated into Walsall Station. Walsall's bus network, as is commonplace across many larger towns across the West Midlands, offers excellent connectivity to all corners of the metropolitan borough of Walsall, whether it be on the 10 towards Pelsall and Brownhills, or the Platinum bus route spanning Birmingham, Walsall and Brownhills. But in this video we'll be paying close attention to National Express West Midlands 529, which runs between Walsall and Wolverhampton, loosely paralleling the Walsall to Wolverhampton line by passing through Willenhall and Portobello. The 529 is one of the more frequent bus routes which serves Walsall, running at an every 7-minute frequency with an end-to-end journey time of about 40 minutes, so it will be interesting to see how the route will be impacted by the reopening of stations in Darlaston and Willenhall. Walsall Railway Station opened on the 9th of April 1849 by the South Staffordshire Railway as part of an extension from Winchnaw Junction to Dudley through Walsall and Wednesbury. Walsall is served by 4 trains an hour, with 2 forming a Wolverhampton to Walsall via Birmingham New Street service and the other 2 forming a Rugeley Trent Valley to Birmingham International service. This Wolverhampton to Walsall service will be key in aiding the town's regeneration plans, which involve the creation of 2,500 new jobs, the construction of 300 new homes and 85,000 square feet of shopping, leisure, office, health and educational facilities. I think the reintroduction of services between Wolverhampton and Walsall along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line will really benefit the town, given the plans for redevelopment around the town centre, the reductions in journey times between Walsall and neighbouring towns and suburbs, and this service will help improve connectivity between the areas served by the railway and the existing extensive bus and rail network from Walsall. The next station we'll be looking at is Darlaston, located on the outskirts of Darlaston and to be built atop the old site of Darlaston James Bridge. Darlaston is the first of 2 stations to be reopened along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, with a combined £85 million worth of investment going into the construction of the 2 stations by the West Midlands Railway programme. Both stations are expected to have pedestrian footbridges, stairs and lifts, ticket machines and information systems, secure bike parking facilities, and large car parks. Darlaston is a small market town that, like Walsall, has a history heavily rooted in industry, particularly the gun trade. Factories would produce gun locks and gun barrels which are supplied to gun manufacturers in Birmingham and brought the town great prosperity. The canal built through Darlaston provided a convenient route for heavy goods to be transported across long distances, later aided by the opening of the Grand Junction Railway, which enabled goods to be transported to the ports of Liverpool by rail, enabling larger manufacturers to appear in the town and employ more and more workers. But in the recession of the late 1970s, Darlaston was dealt a terrible blow as the industries that once made the town prosperous were forced out of business by the recession, and with roofs of factories removed due to empty buildings being taxed, the future was looking bleak for Darlaston. Despite the high unemployment levels seen in Darlaston during the 1980s, the area has recovered well, aided by the construction of housing estates atop the site's old factories and the construction of the Black Country route, which has helped improve access between Darlaston and other towns across the West Midlands region. But things are on the up for Darlaston, and the railway will be key in ensuring that the area can continue developing sustainably and stifle any increase in carbon emissions or congestion which may arise with new employment opportunities in the area. These employment opportunities are expected to be created as part of the Block Switch and Walsall Town deal, which focuses on redeveloping land around Junction 10 on the M6 and in the delegated enterprise zones within Darlaston Town Centre, which were drawn up under the coalition government. There are plans for a brand new industrial park and business park around what was formerly the James Bridge Copper Works, which is forecasted to generate 1,100 new jobs. Plans for a station to be reopened in Darlaston have been floating around for many years now, and it's easy to see why. For one, a key benefit when the station reopens will be the major reduction in journey times between areas across the West Midlands. Wolverhampton to Darlaston is projected to drop down to 11 minutes, while Walsall to Darlaston is projected to drop down to just 5 minutes. Despite the station's location on the outskirts of Darlaston, artists' impressions indicate that the station will have a large car park, which will be useful in aiding prospective users of the railway to Darlaston, and given Junction 9 on the M6 is nearby, it could allow Darlaston to manifest itself into some sort of an unofficial park and ride site for people who would otherwise drive into Birmingham or Wolverhampton. Other public transport links from Darlaston include National Express routes 34, 37 and 39, that will link the station to surrounding neighbourhoods and will be vital in improving connectivity to and from the station. All in all, I think Darlaston will benefit from a station reopening in the area, as it will support redevelopment, improve connectivity to the area, and provide those who live in Darlaston with a frequent railway service to two major cities within the West Midlands. The next station we'll be looking at is Willenhall, the second of the two new stations on the Wolverhampton to Walsall Line, built atop the old site of Willenhall Bilston Street. Once a small agricultural village in the Middle Ages, Willenhall grew into a manufacturing town well renowned for producing locks and keys in the late 18th century, aided by the advent of the Grand Junction Railway. The Grand Junction Railway allowed these manufactured goods to be transported across the country, greatly benefiting those who worked in the trade. As was common across many industrial towns and cities across the North and the Midlands during the 18th century, Willenhall had a thriving coal mining community, especially around Portobello. Although most would associate closures of the mines in these communities with the mid to late 20th century, the industry ended abruptly in the late 19th century after a depression in the iron trade led to the price of coal dropping, which led to a long strike by miners. This miner strike meant that no one could operate any pumping engines in these mines, which led to them subsequently flooding with water. Unfortunately, Willenhall suffered a similar fate to Darlaston during the 1970s due to the industrial decline, with many successful businesses and factories closing, and high levels of unemployment soon followed. But things have since looked up for Willenhall, with further investment and regeneration in the area tipped to follow in the coming years ahead. Currently, the town centre is a rather quiet affair, with a neat selection of shops dotted around a pedestrian-friendly network of streets, including various chain stores and a Morrison's slightly to the east of the town centre. The publishing of the Willenhall Framework Plan by Walsall Council indicates further regeneration plans for Willenhall by establishing 4 areas of opportunity, which will be used to build new housing, create new green spaces, build more community facilities, and improve walking and cycling routes for those living within these communities. The construction of new housing and improvements in employment opportunities strongly improve the case for a railway station to be reopened within Willenhall, as it is imperative that, like Darlaston, the local road network doesn't become overwhelmed and the town can sustainably grow and redevelop in the coming years. Earlier, I'd highlighted how the location of Darlaston may be advantageous if constructing a park and ride site was on the cards, given how close the station is to Junction 10 on the M6. But there have been plans put forward for a park and ride site to be established within the station car park at Willenhall, with 33 spaces catering towards those making journeys from further afield to park their car and travel into Wolverhampton, Walsall and Birmingham by train, which should go some way to further ease congestion within these areas. But this would likely negate the need for one to be built in Darlaston, so it remains to be seen whether one would be more useful in Willenhall than Darlaston, although I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Public transport connections from Willenhall will have much greater coverage of the surrounding areas than the ones from Darlaston, and will be key in ensuring that the railway is as successful as possible. These routes include the 23 towards Bilston and Wednesbury, the 41 towards Ashmore Lake Road and Bentley, and the 326 towards Bilston, Shortheath and Bloxwich. Willenhall is also served by National Express Route 529, a route which we took a look at earlier on in the video. The 8 to 9 minute frequency of the 529, which travels through Wolverhampton, Willenhall and Walsall, is indicative that there is demand along this corridor which may be best catered for by opening a station in Willenhall, given trains towards Wolverhampton and Walsall will be much faster than trundling along a congested Black Country route. But will the 529 be a help or a hindrance to the success of Willenhall station? We'll get back to that slightly later on in the video, but overall, I think a station opening in Willenhall is a largely sensible idea. For one, it supports the regeneration plans that Walsall Council envision for Willenhall, and will provide a semi-regular railway service to destinations already well served by bus routes in Willenhall, such as Wolverhampton and Walsall. There will also be noticeable reductions in journey times to and from Wolverhampton and Walsall, with both Willenhall to Wolverhampton and Walsall estimated to take just 8 minutes by rail. The construction of new housing coinciding with the opening of a railway station in Willenhall could lead to Willenhall becoming more of a popular place to commute from into Wolverhampton and Birmingham, and therefore I think it's safe to say the station will be a massive benefit to the area. The final area we'll be looking at is Wolverhampton, a city and metropolitan borough in the West Midlands well known for being an industrial powerhouse in a bygone era, with extensive coal mining and steel production. Wolverhampton was once considered a woolen town during the 14th and 15th centuries, hence why there are streets within the inner city with names such as Woolpack Street and Woolpack Alley. The city soon grew into being a hub of bicycle manufacturing in the 19th century, with over 200 manufacturers based in the city during the peak of the trade, although the vast majority of the traders had left by the 1960s and 1970s, but still remains a key part of the city's history to this day. As with Willenhall and many other towns across the West Midlands, there was a fair bit of coal mining in and around Wolverhampton, but was much more centred around areas on the outskirts of the city such as Bilston and Heathtown. The trade is believed to have gone back as far as the 14th century, when coal was first discovered in the village of Bradley, just on the outskirts of the city, with coal later discovered in Bilston for the first time in 1401. But Wolverhampton's day is a completely different Wolverhampton to the Wolverhampton of a bygone era, with the city centre largely centred around retail and hospitality, similar to Walsall. There's also a strong aerospace industry that has been established within the city, with American technology company Collins Aerospace based in Ford Houses slightly to the north of the city. It's one of the largest suppliers of aerospace and defence products worldwide, so it's a pretty big deal. As we've seen with the other three areas that we've reviewed so far, Wolverhampton is also seeing major redevelopments occurring within the city over the next few years. The Our City, Our Plan framework released by the City of Wolverhampton Council outlines a plan to improve skills, education and employment opportunities in the city, improve support to local businesses and support innovations in green technology through increased funding put towards research and development. The further devolution of power in the West Midlands will allow for increased flexibility in funding to invest in new housing, commercial property, employment opportunities and green spaces, which will in turn enable wider regeneration and infrastructure improvements to take place across both Wolverhampton and the West Midlands region as a whole. Therefore, it is vital that Wolverhampton has an easily accessible public transport network for those wishing to move into the area from elsewhere, or to make use of the improved services in the local area, to ensure that the town can grow sustainably and to combat any increases in congestion and carbon dioxide emissions as effectively as possible. The transport network in Wolverhampton is undeniably the best of the four areas which we've reviewed in this video, given it has extensive coverage of not just the West Midlands, but the rest of the country as a whole arguably. Wolverhampton sees a whole host of railway services operated by Vanti West Coast, Cross Country, London North Western, Transport for Wales and West Midlands trains, which stretch to just about anywhere in the UK, including North Wales, Glasgow, Bournemouth, Manchester and London. Wolverhampton is also where the Midland Metro currently terminates, which frequently links Wolverhampton with West Bromwich, Wednesbury and Winson Green. There have been suggestions made that the Midland Metro could be extended to New Cross Hospital from Wolverhampton, but interestingly, further plans outlined in the Transport for West Midlands Movement for Growth document indicate that there are further plans for further extensions onto Willenhall and Walsall, which I suspect will be built upon the old Wolverhampton and Walsall railway alignment, the Wolverhampton to Walsall line's former rival. The bus network is equally impressive in Wolverhampton, with bus routes stretching to various parts of the West Midlands, whether it is the 1 towards Dudley, the 16 towards Stourbridge or the 79 towards West Bromwich. An extensive bus network in Wolverhampton will massively benefit the railway, as it will make it a lot easier for passengers to change from the railway in Wolverhampton onto alternative methods of transport to complete journeys that don't end in the city centre. I think this project will massively benefit Wolverhampton, given the regeneration within the area will undoubtedly be a magnet for those living further afield, and will allow the city to attract more custom more easily given the reduction in journey times between Wolverhampton and the surrounding areas, which will decrease reliance on alternative methods of transport, helping to decongest the city and allow Wolverhampton to continue growing sustainably. Now that we've established what the proposals associated with the Walsall to Wolverhampton line are, what the reintroduction of passenger services aim to achieve and discuss the areas which the railway passes through, where might the project fall short and what adjustments could be made? The first adjustment I would look at making to the plans would be to do with the proposed frequency of trains from Wolverhampton to Walsall and Birmingham, when factoring in the frequency and accessibility of alternative methods of public transport towards Willenhall and Darlaston from these areas. This is particularly prevalent when discussing journeys between Walsall and Wolverhampton, as the existing plans indicate that the frequency will be hourly to Walsall and hourly to Birmingham, but when pitted against an every 7 to 8 minute 529 which has far greater coverage of Willenhall in particular, how many passengers who undertake that specific journey would feel incentivised to switch from existing bus services or their car to use the train? Similar projects that I've covered previously run into similar issues, such as the Cowley branch line and the Camp Hill line, in which both projects are paralleled by immensely more frequent bus services. A solution to this problem would be looking at how the frequency can be improved between Walsall and Wolverhampton through the diversion of existing services, or even an outright increase in frequency from Walsall towards Darlaston, Willenhall and Wolverhampton, even if it will prove to be a challenging task. Although the frequency issue could be resolved by intertwining this project with another project under construction nearby, with the project in question being the reopening of Aldridge Station, slightly to the north of Walsall on the currently disused Sutton Park Line. The Sutton Park Line is a freight-only railway line from Walsall to Castle Bromwich that cuts through Aldridge and Sutton Coldfield, which proposed open-access operator Wrexham Shropshire and Midlands Railway are hoping to use as a means of avoiding Birmingham New Street when travelling between Coleshill Parkway and Walsall. Therefore, the existing Birmingham New Street to Shrewsbury service could be diverted via the unelectrified Sutton Park Line between Darlaston and Birmingham New Street, where the service would call at Walsall and Aldridge, before travelling non-stop all the way into Birmingham New Street using the Sutton Park Line and the Birmingham to Peterborough line. This suggestion does come with immense benefits, including a direct Birmingham New Street to Aldridge service, 2 trains an hour between Wolverhampton and Walsall rather than just the one initially suggested, and increases the likelihood of more stations reopening on the Sutton Park Line, which the other Wolverhampton to Walsall service could make calls at. However, in pursuit of this strategy, this will mean there would no longer be any direct services between Cambridge Parkway and Wolverhampton, without needing to change in Birmingham New Street or Walsall, so that could always be viewed as a potential downside. The second change I would make is to do with the number of stations that are being opened along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line, and whether any more stations could be reopened to improve access to and from the railway. If we look at the 2 stations which were open at one stage along the Wolverhampton to Walsall line that aren't planned to be reopened, we've got Plec and Portobello. In my opinion, there wouldn't be a case for a station to be reopened on the old site of Plec if the proposed service pattern were to go ahead, given the proximity of Bescot Bridge and Darlaston with more frequent services than the proposed hourly service on the Darlaston to Walsall leg of the Wolverhampton to Walsall line. The case for reopening Portobello has been investigated a few times over the last 20 years, with a more notable example being in the West Midlands Local Transport Plan released in the mid-2000s, though is clearly seen as a lower priority to reopen than Darlaston and Willenhall, so who knows. Though the case for reopening a station in Portobello is undoubtedly much stronger than Plec, I reckon it is unlikely that the station will ever reopen given how close the station is to Willenhall, and that without significant redevelopment occurring within the immediate proximity of the station, I doubt there would be enough passengers to justify the station's reopening. I'm still hopeful though, and I think it would still make a useful addition to the network regardless. The stations at Darlaston and Willenhall are expected to open either by the end of 2025 or early 2026, so all in all, do I believe that the stations will be a success? I reckon they will be, given there has clearly been enthusiasm locally about stations reopening in Willenhall and Darlaston as evidenced by the number of reopening plans which have floated about for the past few decades, indicating that irrespective of any developments, local authorities and local residents have been in favour of this for quite some time. I can see the direct link to Birmingham New Street being popular, given that has a transport network with even better coverage than Wolverhampton, whether it be towards Coventry and Birmingham International Airport or Cardiff and Leicester, and both Willenhall and Darlaston will be within half an hour of Birmingham by rail. Therefore, the benefits of this railway extend beyond connecting those from surrounding areas to Willenhall and Darlaston for leisure, work or educational purposes, but will equally benefit those living in those two areas at present, given onward connections from Birmingham will be made much easier. If the Wrexham, Shropshire and Midlands Railway end up calling at Darlaston when they commence operations, then that will undoubtedly be useful too, as it would enable direct links towards Nuneaton, Milton Keynes and London Euston, and will be a formidable competitor to Avanti West Coast for clientele from this part of the Midlands. So to conclude, the plans put forward by the West Midlands Combined Authority are for an hourly service from Wolverhampton to Walsall and an hourly service from Birmingham New Street to Wolverhampton and on to Shrewsbury, to call at two new stations at Darlaston and Willenhall upon opening in either late 2025 or early 2026. So what do you think of these plans? Do you believe that this project will succeed? And if not, what do you think could be amended to ensure that it does? Do leave your thoughts down in the comments section below, as I greatly appreciate your inputs and equally enjoy reading them. I would like to take this moment in the video to encourage you all to have a read through the Wolverhampton Heritage and History Society website, linked down in the description below, to learn more about the histories of Walsall, Darlaston, Willenhall and Wolverhampton. This website gave me an excellent insight into what these areas were once like, and if any discussions outside of the railway have interested you, particularly about the history of these areas, then please check them out. Anyway, this is where the video will draw to a close, so thank you all for watching this video. If you've liked this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. Doing these things massively helps me out and I really appreciate it. Anyway, that's it from me folks, take care of yourselves, and see you in the next video.